Today the tutorial, it will be about components in Figma. Components Figma is very powerful thing that you can use. And it is basically important if you are using elements more than once within the page. It's like if you are saving an object with all the attributes. So basically, exactly what this is are reusable design elements that can be used and throughout your project. So when you are using many elements that actually needs to look exactly the same, this is when it's really useful. One of the properties as well that each component can be interactive itself. That's what we are going to see today. So interactive components elements like buttons that change when you roll over, etc. So we'll see that in a minute, okay? It will make more sense. So when do you use components? If there is an element that is common in all the pages, then you can use a component. Also, when those elements are frequently updated, like a logo or a footer or a header or a menu, you can save as a component and reuse it. So the elements with interactions and animations, for example, you can create galleries and make it a component and reuse them across the pages. And you can use different variants of the element. And this will make more sense, and you can come back here and revisit this and read this. But for example, with the buttons, and I have one here demonstrating a little bit of how it works. For example, sometimes when you create a button, you can create different instances, and you can change those variants within that button and reuse it. When do you not need to use components? So, for example, if there is one element that is going to be displayed one, it may not be worth the extra effort that requires creating a component. Elements that they don't need to be synchronized, they may not need to be a component either. So those are the moments you just may not need to use it. So today what I'm going to show a little bit is I'm going to create a couple of these. So this is an example, and a button that is a component, and this is apply the component. The toggle, believe it or not, this one here is this little image that is here, but we will see that it will make more sense in a second. And toggles, which is used with this component. The reason I added these two at the end, is because sometimes when you're using the component and you apply that component on your page, there are instances, or there are properties of that component that you can change in the child component, like an image or like a text, which actually makes it very useful. We will see that in a second. If I click here and I do preview right here, then you see this represents this one represents this one, and then you click and come back. This one is the typical toggle button. So as you can see in the component, you create both versions, and basically what you do is to add the interactions between each other. So it's very similar to what you have seen in a smart animation, for example, but within the same component. And with this image, and this image is this. So which means that you can create the boxes of the image, of the masks, interact them, but then you can change the feeling of that image as well, like here, the feeling of that box. And for this one, it will be this one, label, kicking out. So I am going to do this one demonstrate with you, and this one today. Okay, so let's get that happening. So I'm going to close these windows. So what I am going to start with the most basic one, okay, which is the one of the most basic and the most commonly used, like this one. So it is a toggle component. Okay, so normally when you finish creating an object that you know that you want to make it a component and add some interactions to it, you select the element and you have to make it a component. You can either right click and make create component. Okay, could be one quick way to do it. Also, you can tick here in the properties panels at the top and make it a component. Okay, and that's the initially. So with this, I am saying, okay, this element is one component, and now the next step is to create both stages. Like this is the default state, and I'm going to create the next, which is the on click. So that's what is called a variant. You can add a variant of that component by clicking here, add variant. Also, of course, normally in the hover. So yeah. So main component and then add variant right here. So I would like to look into the frames area as well to kind of have because it's like a little bit of a map. Whoops, I went to the previous one. It's like a little bit of a map of what I'm doing. So, okay, so as you can see, I have the default state. This is a little bit not very intuitive for me. So the default state is at the bottom and the variant is here. So it's this kind of the opposite in my view. But anyway, this is the default one and this is the variant. So the one that I want to modify is this one. And basically what I do now is to just make whatever modifications I want, which is just going here from one side to the other. You can also change the color or yeah. So okay, now I have two variants of the component. And what I want to do now is to add some interactions inside it, which is the moment there is nothing. So the way to do that is by selecting the element and going to the prototype area right here. Then I click on interactions like I would normally do. And after the interaction, I start to say, okay, I want this to happen on click. The action itself, and this is when it changes a little bit, okay? So far, we have mostly used navigate to, which is let's link into a different page or a different frame. So navigate to that frame. But this one, when it's a component, it's only used on the component, you just change to, because what the component does is to swap one element to the other. So I select change to instead of navigate. That's one of the main difference. Then instead of frame, I have the property, which as you can see is right here. Then default, and then I go to the variant 2. And in animation, I just tell basically what we do with animation, which is smart animate, which this is when if I want the transitions to happen softly. This okay. See, and then I want the other way around. I want when I click this one, then I come back to the initial one, and I also add an interaction. You can also add right here, like you normally do, and you just click it. On click, it will automatically say change to. It will go to the default, and it will be like here. Okay, now this is the component. Okay, yes, that's good. Okay, how do I know if this works? Is if I do preview on this one, that's not going to demonstrate the component at all. It's basically, it will just show this, which is not what I want at all. So how do I insert this new component, and where do I find it? So I will go to assets, which is right here. And in the assets is where the components are being stored. This is when they save a component, that's where you will find them. So what is happening is that it will, these are the components that I already created. And this information that you see here is the page where it's located. Look, if I go to file for a second, you see that I created different pages depending on what. So basically, that's what the first thing that is indicating me. This component is in this page. So it's in the toggle page because I decided to call it that way. Then I click and then showcase. Showcase is the name. Showcase is the name of the frame you see here. So this is what is this showcase. Then I click here and then I hit total and I just drag it. And this is, okay, I'm going to do this again because this is important, okay? If I click here, and this can be very confusing, it was confusing for me. If I do this one, it's not going to work. It's not going to work because it's only inserting the instance but not the component. So only this phase, which is obviously you can do that if you want. I have never used it, but that's what it will happen, and it can be very confusing. So the way to do it is to select the component and drag it on the page like that. And okay, now I'm ready to just see if this work or not. So I'm going to click preview. And let's see if I click. Yep. So that's it. So it did work. That's great. So that's pretty simple. You can have many variants. You can have another one, a third one, as you can see in the showcase page. As you can see, for example, you have different, one on click, one on hover. So you can have many variants as well. So it's not only two variants. Okay, the next one that I wanted to create, and I'm going to come back to the showcase, and this is the tick, the radio button right here. And the reason why I wanted to start to go with this one, okay, is because I want to demonstrate what you can change in a child component. In this file, the child component is more details at what you actually can be customized in a child component and what cannot be customized in a child component. And I will show you, and I will come back to this one. Okay, so this is the one that I'm going to create, and I want to make this component. I can, like this. Create component. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same area, and I'm going to add a variant of this, okay? So, okay, I kind of do the same thing. I just click and make the addition, I'm going to just change the color. I'm going to use this color. Okay, and then I am going to add the interaction. I select this one, and then I go prototype, on click again, and action change to variant 2. You can just smart animate, and then again going to do the same. Change to default, smart animate. Hold on, okay. So let's double check if this is being, yeah, it's in the radio button page. I want to
again, insert it. So I'm going to showcase and I drag it on the page like that. So okay, let's say that I want to have those selections. I select, for example, select gender, for example, and I create, I duplicate. I'm using the same component, okay? But I'm using it 3 times. So first I want to see if it's working before continuing. So I'm going to do preview. Yep, it's working. Okay, so far so good. But I want a different text for each child component. So this is the parent component, and these are the child component. So let's say, right. Okay, so as you can see, you can edit the text. So that makes it really powerful for buttons, for example, that you want the same look but only changing the text. So I'm going to do preview. So okay, yeah, it's working. So okay, what if I want to reset all changes? You can you can reset all changes. You can also say, yes, I just don't want this element to be a component anymore, so you just say detach. You can make changes to a child component, and they say, well, I actually want those changes in the main component. So you can say, put the changes that I made to the main component. This one is important for me because sometimes if you are working on a page and you are using many components and you kind of don't remember, or you can, it's easy to lose track of where the parent component is, because that's the one that controls the children or the child components better. So you can click here and I select the child component and I say go to main component, and it will take me exactly to the one that is controlling. And this is obvious when there is interaction in the component, but a component can be just an object without interaction, so it can be visually confusing. So I do find that very useful. So let's say, for example, that I want to change, instead of purple, I want a different color. So I click until getting to the rectangle. I'm going to design. I'm going to change. Let's say that I want blue instead. Okay. So let's see if that has actually propagated. See? So that makes it really, really powerful when in Figma, when you need to control. There is certain elements that needs to be consistent, but then you also need to be able to edit certain properties, because otherwise you will have 100 components. So that's one of the very common ways that you can use it, and that's what I wanted to do this one. So let's come back to the child components, such as now hopefully is making more sense. So the elements that you can change in a child component are the text content and alignment, the text style in a child component, fill the colors, the stroke colors, the effects, and the image fields. Okay, so when you feel like a square or an object with an image, and what cannot be customized in a child component is kind of the layer structure cannot be changed in the child component. If you apply and if you add auto layout settings, etc., that cannot be modified in a child component. And the layer naming inside the component, because a component can have many layers, that cannot be modifying the child component. But that makes it very powerful in terms of how you can use it. So what happens, right? Let's come back to the radio button for a second. I want to demonstrate something. So I am going to say reset all changes. You see, if I click reset all changes, it just comes back to the way it was, okay? So let's say, for example, that I modify the text or the content, but I'm going to change the label by default. So what I'm going to do is to say, let's call it radio. You see how it changed only in the child component that has all the changes reset, which means that if you make any changes in any of the child component and then change the parent component, those changes will not take effect. So you kind of, it will be more predominant. It will override the changes that you did in the child over the ones in the parent component. So that's something to also keep in mind. All right, so the next one that I wanted to demonstrate is the image, and the reason why I wanted to work on this one was because I wanted to demonstrate how you can also edit the images. So for example, I'm referring to that one. So I am going to create from scratch, and I'm going to just select this element, okay? So I am going to create also, select an element, and I'm going to add it, instead of a rectangle, I want to be a frame. So I'm going to create a frame instead of a rectangle, because that with the frame you have better control. So I am going to do, instead of fill, I'm going to do it by default. The one is let's create and add a color, and then I'm going to duplicate this one. So then I'm going to this an arrow layout, so I can control the content. And now this bit will make more sense. It's better to have an arrow layout, and you will see the reason why. And with this one, I am going to, this is the default is the over. Okay, but wait a second, I did not convert a component before. If I already have these elements created, and I want to convert both of them into a component, I can select both of them, and instead of create component, or is you say component set. So that way it already has the variance. And then I just do the prototype, and I'm going to add some interactions. I'm going to do on click and change to frame 2, and let's smart animate, and do the other way around, smart animate. Okay, so it's in the asset, and then I'm going to drag it. Let me see. Okay, I have to click in until I actually, because here I was just selecting this frame, and then I have to dig in until I find out the component itself. So let's see. Okay,
kind of worked. And I want to demonstrate something now. The constraints. Let's see if this change. And I will explain this in a second. Yeah. So the reason, and I'm going to start. The reason why, when I created the squares, I used a frame was because if it has auto layout, you can control the direction of the hover. So for example, if I select the child component and I click preview, see, yeah, you see how the direction change based on the constraint that you see here. So if I say click in the constraints in the middle, then, and I click preview again, then I can control the direction as well. And it took me, when I tried to learn, it took me a while to figure that out when I started using Figma, but and that's why I wanted to give you that tip. Okay, so let's say that I want an image instead of a red square. So I go here, and in fill, you see how you click in fill, you can select gradient, you can select a solid, you can select a video, but there is an option for image, and that's where you can select an image. I think I have an image about, select this one, okay. So let's see if this works. So yeah, so that's exactly what I wanted to do. So you can have that control. So that way, for example, it will be very useful if you are using, you know, like a preview, card preview, and you want each text to look different or image. And in this one, I have I want a different image. I do the same, but I go and select a different image. Let's see, Firefly, I think this is a different. See? Yeah, it's a different image. So, but it still are controlled by the same parent component. So that's a little bit of what I wanted to demonstrate. But let's say, for example, that in a prototype, if I want these images to be different, or if I want these preview boxes, this could be a component that have something in common, but the content will be different. So it can be really, really handy to use across your prototype. The next tip that I wanted to do is just because it's something that it took me a while to work it out. Okay, if I'm working on this prototype right here, right, and I already styled and put all the elements in here, but now I know that that I'm going to reuse this button. I'm going to use this button, and I want to make it a component. So how do you organize the components? When you want something to organize the component, you just normally do not work on the component on the page. You have to work on the component outside the page. If you check online to see if where do you save all the components, because you want to save all the components in one place, not having everywhere like I had it here. I just wanted to demonstrate each case to you, but you want to have them somehow in one place. The majority of people will say create a different page and put all the components in there, and that makes sense. Okay, that's not normally the way I do it, but that makes sense. You can also create a frame on the same page
and that frame can be called components. And then in this frame, you put all the components that you create. I like this option, and the reason I like this option is because if I am using a drop-down menu, for example, and that drop-down menu is going to be linked to all the pages, and I want the same link to work across different pages, I am able to control that in the main component, and I don't have to link every single time or for every single page, and that is saves so much time. But if you put the components on a different page, the link will you wouldn't be able to adjust or change the link after creating the links. So that's why I like to use it on the same page, but everybody has the different ways to work. So okay, so let's say that I want to make this button a component. So what you do is to select the button and take it out of your prototype and put it on the components page and work on that in this area. And from here, you convert that component as we did before and add a variant and make any modifications. Let's say, for example, that I want to do hover, and I want to hover as well that increase the width. So this one will be 26. Open a little bit. So I want this to happen on hover. So I am going to create interaction as I did. Interaction on while hovering, and change to variant 2, smart animate. Okay, okay, I create, but I cannot test it until I actually use the component. Okay, so okay, now I want the component to be here. So I have to go to the assets and go to this page, like prototypes, this one, and then I'm going to the assets. Let's go again because I didn't see. Okay, here it is. You see how it can be confusing, very confusing if you don't have all the components in one place. It can feel like it's everywhere. So I want to replace this button with this, and I am going to just go here, drag the contacts and drag it. But now I want to place it exactly where I want. Here I want this one to be next to each other, and one of the ways, and one way that I always find it quite useful, okay, I cut this one, okay, and I want to replace this object. So I click in until I'm selecting the object, and when I'm going to paste it, I go paste to replace. Paste to replace, it means that it's going to replace the element. You don't have to start to move it around. It's just replacing exactly as the element as it is. So let's see if this works. Yeah. Okay. Yep. That's it. That's it. The reason why I didn't have to roll back is because in the prototype is while hovering. While hovering means only while it's hovering the trigger, the element that the mouse is on top of. So what means that as soon as the mouse leaves, then it will go. So you don't have to, for this case, you don't have to link it back like we did with on click. So okay, so I think
that could be a good summary of what you can do, how components work, and how to create a component, and how you can use it in your layouts, in your prototypes. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that is clear. I know components can take a little bit of time to progress, but as soon as you learn how to use it, you just start it everywhere, and then you don't have to start working on many frames to be able to create simple animations. Okay, guys, thank you, and I will see you next time. Bye.